in 2002, we quickly changed objectives. We changed objectives without the consent of the American people because mostly our politicians lied to us, and Congress and the Senate were out to lunch and they were in on it. So what we did is we switched to regime change wars and never-ending wars that only sent good men and women off to die while corporations got rich and while our government officials more deeply enriched themselves as well. So seeing through all that, I was greatly disenfranchised. I've always been a conservative. I've always been a Republican. I believe in our foundation values of the Republican Party. But by the end of the Bush administration, I was done with Republicans. And then Obama came along, and that made me even more furious. And then I saw how the Republicans just rolled over and backstabbed the Tea Party. So come 2016, I didn't know what I was going to do politically. I was still in the military. I was deployed overseas under Obama, which meant we were deployed and we could be killed, but we really couldn't fight back. And then Donald Trump came onto the scene. He punched through the establishment, and the first thing he did is he went after Republicans. And he told all of us what we already knew, that the Republicans had gotten it wrong. And then he went after the Democrats and pointed out all their many flaws and how they were going after us on every level. How they were bringing in immigration because they wanted to replace American workers, while the big corporations shipped our jobs overseas so China could get more powerful, while the Republicans and Democrats did nothing about it. So after Trump won, I got the privilege of going to combat under him 3 more times. It was a 90-day difference. He enabled our men and women on the ground to crush the enemy, and we did. President Trump also did what no other president in my lifetime has done. He decisively used military power. Stated the military objective, we went out, we accomplished it, and then he tried to get us out, because that's what he promised to do, and that was the right thing to do for the American people.
Yeah.
After I retired from the military in 2018, because of the leadership that President Trump provided, I wanted to continue to serve my country, so I transitioned into a career in the intelligence community. Retired on a Friday and then sworn at the CIA on Monday. Because it was the greatest honor of my life to go out and fight for this country, and I wanted to continue that job. I continued serving in that capacity until about 2 years ago, when my world got turned upside down. My wife, Shannon Kent, who was a special operator, cut from the same ilk as me, was killed fighting ISIS in Syria. Shannon was killed about a month after President Trump tried to get us out of Syria. So I got the opportunity to meet President Trump and tell him how I felt about his policies and how he was trying to bring the will of the American people back to this country and the voice of the American people back to D.C. And foreign policy-wise, he was spot on. We needed to defeat ISIS, but we didn't need to get sucked into another chapter in our endless wars. So I told him that, and President Trump was gracious enough to listen to me and provide me with a way to speak with him and his administration. So right after Shannon was killed, we all saw what happened next. The establishment went after President Trump. They turned on him, starting with so-called experts like James Mattis, Brett McGurk from the State Department. They began their treasonous slow roll of making sure our troops stayed in danger while they ran to the media and tried to portray it like President Trump was somehow ending the nation by trying to end a war. So, despite all the personal grief I was going through, and that my children were going through, losing their mother, and I lost my soulmate, I knew that I had to speak out. I only had one voice, but I had 20 years of experience behind me serving in special operations in the intelligence community. So I sought out any reporter who would listen to me and anybody who would take an op-ed that I wrote, and I started speaking out about President Trump's, how right he was on foreign policy. I continued working in that capacity up until November. And then we all saw what happened in November of 2020. Big tech, the mainstream media, unelected bureaucrats, corporations, and labor unions pushed the narrative down our throat that Joe Biden won an overwhelming victory. And we couldn't even question it. And if we did, we'd be labeled as insurrectionists, terrorists, and all kinds of crazy things that we know that we're not. We had legitimate questions to ask, and there's still answers. We still need answers to those questions. Otherwise, we don't have a nation. So I knew then that I wanted to do something. I was furious. I just didn't know what. And that was until the woman that I voted for, that I hope someday to meet and to tell her to hold strong, that she stabbed me in the back and she stabbed all of you in the back. When she cast that vote to impeach Trump, it wasn't just about President Trump. It wasn't about the fact that she reacted emotionally because she'd never been under stress before, and she hadn't gotten the full timeline of the facts. It wasn't about that. She painted an X on this district. This district is right in between two failed liberal cities that are ran by absolute activist buffoons. And I say buffoons, but actually they're not buffoons. They're actually pretty smart. They're utilizing the full scope of every instrument of power from the media to tech to cram that narrative down our kids' throats and down our throats. And they have the governors on their sides as well. So when Representative Butler cast her vote, she put open season on the 3rd district. The radical left knows that we can be taken advantage of. So I knew then I had to do something. I never wanted to run for office. I never wanted to be a politician. But I've never been able to ask somebody else to go fight for me. So I'm asking you to go forward again and to fight for you and to push back against all this, to go to Congress and to let Washington, D.C. know that I know them. I know how the federal government works. I know how the freaking intelligence community works. And I see through them. And I'm there to represent all of you and to bring your voices back to Washington, D.C. I learned a lot over 20 years of pretty continual combat, pretty continual strife. I learned that you can't ask someone to go fight on your behalf. You can't convince them. You can't motivate them. It has to come from within. God gave all of us individual characteristics and strengths. And for whatever reason, God gave me the ability to go and fight. He put it within me. I've never had a problem running towards danger, and I still don't, and I still want to go do it. If you rely on someone, on people that need to be convinced to go and fight, it's going to be a bad day when things get really, really stressful. I wish that I didn't have to do this. I wish that people like me were still in our little bin of guys that go and fight wars overseas because things are so peaceful back here. You don't need people like me, maybe as a police officer or something. But that's not the times we're living in. The left is coming at us with absolutely everything, and we know it. So we have to start putting warriors back into Washington, D.C. People who respect the right of people to have their voices represented, respect our Constitution, but have enough healthy disdain for the federal government to go in there and tell them that we see through their lies and we're here to restore the people's voice. So I would be honored if you would please consider me as your nominee. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Joe Kent.